All right, we are back on. Defendants are present, represented by counsel. Good. Ms. Sheffield, ready to proceed? All right, let's go ahead and get the witness. All right, let's get the panel.
So rise for the jury.
All right, you all right in the front row there? Okay. Just so excited to get to your seat, right? All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed your lunch. We're ready to proceed with the evidence. All right, thank you. Mr. Sheffield.
Okay, very good. Officer Minshew, it's no longer Officer Minshew, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, if I slip into that, it's only because you're the officer on this case. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure of before we kind of went back through some of your testimony is that prior to today, you've had an opportunity to review the report that you wrote in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You've also had the body cam video that we've been talking about, and you've had an opportunity to review that body cam video in its entirety?
That's correct.
Okay, because it runs for quite a long time after you get there. I just want to make sure that you've been able to see all of it.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Have you reviewed anything else prior to your testimony today?
The transcript.
The transcript of the body cam video?
And the video that Mr. William Bryan shot.
Okay, so you've had a chance to look at that as well?
Yes.
In preparation for today?
That's correct.
All right, perfect. One of the things that I wanted to make sure I understood is that as a law enforcement officer, you've had particular training on use of force.
Yes,
right?
we have to have it yearly.
Yearly, as well as how to de-escalate situations.
Yes.
Okay. And so one of the things that you're doing when you arrive on the scene in this case is you are trying to make an initial assessment of what in the world has just happened here, right?
Yes.
And in this scene in particular, because there is a body lying on the ground that is bloody, and there are two men standing around it, you need to make sure that the scene is safe.
Yes, correct.
Safe for you and potentially others.
Correct.
Okay. So one of the very first things that we see you do is that you get out and you begin to try to assess the situation, right?
Yes, that's correct.
You also ask that the two men that are standing, who we now know to be Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael, that their guns are put away, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in no time did you see Travis McMichael go to the grass to try to pick up his shotgun?
No, I didn't see him do that. No.
The issue for you also is to try to start to get a little information from these gentlemen, right?
Yes.
So you are trying to assess their level of cooperation when you're first engaging them in conversation. Is that
Yes,
fair?
I'm observing that from the beginning, yes.
Okay. And so one of the things that you will do is you will ask questions.
Correct.
You will see how they answer you in return, right?
Yes.
You'll begin to try to develop a sense of their mental state, right?
Yes.
And in this case, it was one of the things that you've already testified to is that there was a lot of pacing going on, right? Travis McMichael was doing a lot of pacing in a small area.
Correct.
Greg McMichael was doing a lot of pacing in a small area.
That's correct.
Travis McMichael actually had blood kind of covering him front and back.
Yes.
Right? Okay. You recall seeing that he had blood on his arms, right?
Yes, it was on his arms, hands, and on his head.
On his head.
Yep.
And you recall seeing that he also had some blood here on the back of his neck even.
Yes.
Okay. So this was a fairly, as you were beginning to observe it, a fairly traumatic scene that was kind of unfolding in front of your eyes.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Travis McMichael was still under the influence of that trauma.
Objection to speculation, Your Honor.
Based on your observations, he was still under the influence of that trauma.
Objection to speculation, Your Honor.
I'm not asking to speculate what was in his mind, that he was visibly traumatized by the experience.
Let's let him describe it. That'll be easier for the court.
Well, I'm going to lead him with
determination.
cross-examination, Your Honor, and so I'm going to say to him the question that I want him to answer.
So, understanding what the basis of the question is,
Yes.
it's going to be important for the court to get an understanding from the witness
Sure.
whether he is responding to your question or whether he's testifying to it. You can ask it either way.
Okay. I'm not asking you to guess what was in his mind, but you visually took in the way he was behaving. Is that correct?
I did.
And he appeared to be traumatized.
I would suspect that any person with a soul or a heart would be in shock. from
You heard
that.
me asking about Travis McMichael, though, right?
Yes, I heard.
Okay. He appeared to be traumatized.
I don't know what he was thinking. I was also taking in a lot of things myself, trying to figure out what had happened and what type of dangers could be around my area. That's the main thing that I was thinking of. But I did see him pacing
Okay.
back and forth, yes.
At some point, did you hear him cry out, gasp and cry out?
I don't recall.
Don't recall that. Okay. The next thing that you did is you began to then make the decision that the scene was safe enough to call in personnel to come and begin to assess the scene and to bring in ambulances, correct?
Yes, it was enough for me to go ahead and summons paramedics and other police units.
Okay. While you were on scene and around the body of Mr. Arbery, you had talked about hearing like a breath sound that you called a death rattle. That was the term that you used. And I believe your testimony is that that is the sound that the body makes after the person is deceased. It's just sort of air coming out of the lungs. Is that fair?
Yeah, from what I've always heard it as is like a death rattle, a death gurgle, referred to as agonal breathing, to where it's, from my knowledge, from what I've known while policing, is that it's when the brain doesn't have any oxygen, it's where it's a natural reaction for the body.
Okay. So it's not a sign of consciousness as you understand it.
Correct.
It's not a sign of the brain being intact and forming and making decision.
That's how it appeared, yes.
Okay. And so other than that sound of air, that agonal breathing, Mr. Arbery did not say anything or speak any words.
No, he didn't.
Did not cry out that you heard.
No.
Okay. Now you were joined by other officers pretty soon thereafter, Officer Duggan being the first one, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You were also joined by an Officer Caitlin Roberts.
That's correct.
Okay. You were also joined by Officer Brandeberry,
Yes.
who was working with Officer Roberts, right?
Yes, that's correct.
All these people, to your knowledge, had body cam as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I think there was an Officer Mitchell that kept a crime scene log.
Yes.
People coming in and out of
That's
the crime
correct.
scene. An Officer Jackson who may have assisted in some way. You recall?
Officer Jackson did.
Officer Oliver, another officer there.
I don't recall her while I was on scene. I don't know if I don't remember speaking with her or seeing her out there particularly.
Okay. All right. Also, as one of your goals, once you determine that everybody is going to be safe, there's not any active danger present, you are now looking to maintain the integrity of the scene.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's where you begin to kind of rope it off with the crime scene tape.
Yes.
Right? And just to be sure, The evidence that you were roping off in the crime scene tape was ultimately collected by Officer Ramos. Do you recall that?
I'm not sure. That was, I believe, the scene was still being ongoing whenever I left.
Okay. To your knowledge, though, Travis never walked around the scene and picked up or removed any evidence.
To my knowledge, no, and I didn't see him do that either while I was there.
Right, and never attempted to run away or flee when you were there.
That's correct. It did
Just
not.
stood in the spot and kind of waited.
That's correct.
Okay. One of the things that I wanted to make sure we understood is the video that you obtained from Roddy Bryan, Mr. William Bryan. Is you said that you've watched that all the way through. That's been admitted into evidence, and I want to put it up here for just a moment. Okay?
Yes.
Hold on 1 second, Your Honor. This thing has got a mind of its own. Now it's leaving spots everywhere. This is what happened to the state. It's taken on the settings of the pointer and the touch piece, so we need to have Cedric back to turn it off. Otherwise, we're just going to get stuck in the same position we were before. So we'll need to take a pause, Your Honor.
All right.
Sorry, you're welcome to sit for a minute. But
No, let's go. Let you go ahead and take a step outside of the courtroom and see if we can get this addressed, and then we'll bring it right back.
All right for the jury. Please be seated.
They're on their way.
just so the court knows, I practiced this for about 10 minutes. It was all set up and didn't touch it. So I expected this to be a Broadway quality demonstration. Something's happening where the Elmo device is starting to put dots on everything, and it's like, see how it's got the circle up there? It's robbing the controller. The only thing I've done is try to open and close the Elmo so I can do a video, but it's putting up metal dots everywhere. clear. Okay. Let me see if I can do it. Do you mind? Thank you so much. All right, so we're done.
That's the camera system.
All right.
Put it on video.
Okay. Perfect.
Let's
All right.
test with you.
Thank you. All right, I'm ready. Thank you, Cedric. Okay,
Back together.
we're ready.
Okay. We're falling off the wall. Back together. Let's go.
I think I saw what he did, so that happened again.
All rise for the jury. Please be seated.
All right, we are back on. Everybody is present. Mr. Sheffield.
Thank you. And so, Mr. Minshew, we were just talking earlier about the video that you collected from Mr. William Bryan at State's Exhibit 190. I now have it up on the Mondo board. Can you see it on your screen there too?
Yeah, I can see it.
So you have viewed the initial part of this video, and I think from what your testimony was is that you have shared with us that this is Mr. Bryan behind Mr. Arbery. The jurors can't hear me. I'm sorry. I think what your testimony was that when you got this video from Mr. Bryan, that this is the view of Mr. Bryan coming up Holmes Road towards Zellwood. Is that correct?
It looks like, I believe it's toward, well, he turns around at some point. I'm not sure which direction it is now. I'm not sure which direction it's at now because I think they turn around after this part here.
So he turns around after this part. That's correct. When he turns around, do you know what direction he runs back towards?
I'd have to look at it I'm not sure which direction they're going in at that moment from this clip.
Okay, let's just play it very briefly. See him running. And then he turns and comes back the other way. You see that? And here's one more shot of it. All right, so now that you've seen that, isn't it true that Mr. Arbery is running up Holmes towards Zellwood?
Yes, that does look like towards Zellwood before he backs up. Looks like it.
And then when he turns around, he's now going to be running back down Holmes towards Satilla.
Then, that direction does go back towards Satilla.
Okay, very good. And you'll notice there up at the top of the road there's no car or truck in the road up there, correct?
Not in camera, no.
Not in camera. And you have no information that there was any car or truck up there at that time?
I can't see one.
Yeah,
and
so there's not one there.
Yeah, no one told me if there was one up there or not.
Okay, very good. Now there's a phase of this video starting right about now where it kind of goes out, for lack of a better word. You can't really see anything except the bottom of the floor. of the truck, right? Here's where it begins to get dropped and lowered down to the floor. Now that starts at about 0.06 seconds. Did you see that? If I go back here, 0.06, we see the turn, and now the camera goes down. Is that about right?
Looked about right, yes.
Okay. So at about 0.06 seconds, it goes down to the floor of the car. It stays down.
And Judge, I'll object to him just narrating this. If he wants to ask him a question about it, that's just.
Sounds good. Let him testify. Okay. Video.
Nope, no worries. All right, now we start at 50 seconds to see a little bit of daylight again. Do you agree with that?
That's what it appears to be, yes.
Okay. And now at about 1 minute 8 seconds, we see the road again. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now looking down the road here, this is heading down Holmes Road towards Satilla.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and where the road curves like that, we've been calling it a dog leg. Is that a fair term for you as well?
Haven't heard it before, but it does curve to the left.
Okay, where you kind of can't see the rest of the road.
Okay.
And then in a very tiny, tiny spot, you can see Mr. Arbery down there.
That's
It
correct.
appears he's sort of past the dog leg already. Past the curve in the road?
Yes, that's what
It appears that way, okay. And so just to do the simple math, it's about a minute worth of time where Mr. Arbery turns to run back up Holmes Road that we do not see what he's doing. Would you agree with that?
It looked like about a minute.
About a minute, okay. And as far as you know, is there any other video that exists of that minute worth of time?
I was not made aware of any other video.
Okay. Okay. One of the things I wanted to come back to on your testimony previously was the time period that you noted between when you heard the two gunshots and when you arrived at the intersection of Holmes and Satilla. Okay? And I want to make sure that I heard your testimony correctly. That you said it was between 45 and 60 seconds. Okay. I thought I heard somebody say something. Oh, okay. That was between about 45 and 60 seconds between when you heard the gunshots and when you arrived at the scene.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at it on the clock, but it felt like it was about 45 seconds to a minute, yes.
Meaning that where did you say you were when you heard the gunshots?
I had already went through the first intersection, and I was probably about halfway from the first intersection of Zellwood and Satilla, and Satilla and Holmes.
So halfway between Zellwood and Satilla. Help me understand that again. Let me get the map up.
Yep.
Let me just see if I can get the map up. That's okay. Here's our camera. We'll just do it the old-fashioned way. Okay. All right. I'll bring this around to the jury. If you could show us where you think you were on Satilla when you heard the shot.
And Judge, may I approach just to see what's going on?
Yes, you can move around to see what's being presented.
I was around, this is the first intersection I was referring to.
Okay.
And I had already passed that one and passed several homes.
Wait, but let's do so without blocking the jury.
I'm sorry, am I blocking anyone?
Why don't you bring it back this way in just a moment once we get it.
I had already went through this first intersection and I had already passed several homes.
Okay.
So I feel like it was around this area here.
All right. Now, do you recall the address of the home that you received the call about?
The original address was 219.
220?
I'd have to go back and look at
Well, you
it.
think it was 219. So here's 219, okay?
Okay.
Here's 220 right there.
Okay.
Is it your testimony that you had not reached 219, the home about the call, which brought you out there at the time you heard the shots, or that you had reached around 219 when you heard the shots?
I just remember being a window around this area.
Somewhere
here.
in there.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So you've kind of pointed to this area. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair.
Okay, I'm going to walk back this way, just make sure what and where he's indicated. Okay? All right, very good. And if you take a look at this, 219 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses away from the corner. You agree?
Mm-hmm.
And you're traveling, what, 4 or 5 miles an hour?
A few miles an hour.
A few miles an hour. You've got your windows open.
Yeah, back windows are down.
Back windows are down. Okay. And you're saying that it takes you 60 seconds to 45 seconds to drive these 5 houses.
Felt like it took about that time.
Felt like it did. Okay. Now, you recall in your report that you wrote, you have that with you?
Not on me, no.
Okay, would you like to get it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, where is it?
I mean, do you have a copy?
I can show you mine.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
that'll be fine.
Okay, all right.
Or do you have a clean copy, Mr. Sheffield? Okay.
I'm going to show you my copy to refresh your memory about your report.
Yeah.
Do we have a clean copy?
I have a clean copy. I can.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I want to direct your attention to this first few lines here of the report, and just where it says right there. Just take a look at that real quickly and see if that is on our subject.
Yes.
Okay. So in the report that you wrote, this is a report that you wrote that day?
Oh, yeah, that day.
Okay. And the reason that you do this is so that you can accurately remember what happened that day.
Yes,
That day was a stressful day for you.
obviously.
Okay. And so the basis of writing reports is so that you can memorialize all the important details that you may need to recall
Yes,
should you be brought to court and have to testify about something a year or so later.
correct.
Okay. And in your report, you wrote that a few seconds later, I heard
Objection, Judge, to Mr. Sheffield reading from the report, which is hearsay.
it's his statement, and I'm reading it to him. Okay.
You can you can refresh his recollection
I
with it.
understand. Are you now recalling
Yes, I
what
read
you
that.
said about the time period between when you heard the shots and when you arrived at the 2 white males waving their arms?
That's correct.
And how many seconds was it?
I said in my report a few seconds.
A few seconds, which is definitely not 45 to 60 seconds, correct?
Yeah, well, the window for me was, with it being a few seconds, it was under a minute. It was when you're driving down through there, it felt like 45 seconds to a minute.
It felt like that, but it really wasn't that. It was a few seconds.
Okay.
Right?
Objection
Yeah, I'm not
has
sure.
been answered, Judge.
I don't think he's actually admitted to what a few seconds is, Your Honor. It's a real simple thing, but I think I've asked him how long it was. He says it felt like 60 seconds to 45 seconds. That's fine. I've asked him, in fact, that it was a few seconds, and I think he hasn't said yes to that it was just a few seconds.
He's provided you an answer. If you want to,
And your answer was?
Yeah, I wasn't looking at a clock,
Okay.
but
All right.
again, it felt like a few seconds. Yeah,
Okay.
it was definitely under a minute.
All right. Yes. Yes. You guys put it in, yeah, okay. So where is Minshew bike? There we go. Okay. All right. I want to show you what's been admitted into evidence as states 228. This is your body cam. I think you said you had an opportunity to review that.
I have, yes.
Okay. And what I want to do is I want to play just the first few seconds of it. Okay? Now at this moment we don't hear any sound. Why is that?
You have a 30-second delay when you start recording. It goes back records, but it doesn't pick up your audio until 30-second mark.
Okay. And is it also the case that you don't have any dashboard camera in operation at this time?
Yes, in that particular patrol car, did not have dash cam.
It doesn't. It wasn't even equipped with dash cam.
That's correct. Wasn't equipped.
Okay. Very good. All right. Now, when you mentioned earlier that as you came to the corner of Satilla and Holmes, that there were two men waving you down. These are the two men you're speaking of.
Yes, that's correct.
And they were trying to draw your attention over to where they were standing.
That's correct.
Okay. And this is when you pull up, you find them standing in about this same general area.
Yes.
Okay. Now we hear some heavy breathing. Is that you?
Couldn't tell you. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Dispatch to 184 status. Dispatch all units involved in emergency traffic, jail 2.
What did you just hear Mr. McMichael say?
He said, hey, Roddy has it on film.
Okay.
All right, guys, everybody got the weapons up, correct? Okay. Dispatch, roll a squad.
When you say roll a squad, is that when you're saying roll in the units, other units to come and do crime scene?
No, squad is emergency medical personnel.
Okay.
I'm 10-4.
Clear 10-4.
And what is it that you just heard Mr. McMichael say?
Sound like the Greg McMichael said he had no choice.
Okay.
You know where you got shot at, man? Is he shot on the front side, too? Okay, all right.
Dispatch 184, I need to know if you were involved.
All right. There's the blood on the back of Travis's head that you spoke about.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay.
Negative. It's going to be a black middle of the roadway. Looks like about mid-20s. 136.
Do you see Mr. McMichael trying to console his son?
I see him have his hand on his shoulder.
He says he had no choice. Did you hear that?
I heard him say that.
Okay.
Go ahead and start this way, please. Satilla Drive at Holmes Road. Satilla-
Okay, so where we're pausing here, one of the things that you were talking about early on is the relationship to Mr. Arbery's body, where the gentlemen were standing, and how you were coming down the road, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is it true to say that there are no obstructions, no fences, nothing that blocks a person from running across that yard as you see it here?
I don't see any obstructions in that yard, no.
Okay. And you were, as we watch this come around, I think I moved it forward.
Satilla Drive at Holmes Road. Satilla Drive.
Okay. All right, I want to fast forward to a spot on the video where you're speaking, and only you're speaking to another officer.
Objection, Judge. What's the relevance of, objection to relevance, I'll say that. So what, then Officer Minshew is talking to another officer about.
So this is,
Hearsay as well.
okay. So this is what we were just talking about, Judge. It deals with the time of the officer's travel from hearing the gunshots and from coming in to kind of view the scene. And he is giving a statement to this officer about where he was when he heard the gunshots and how quickly he arrived on the scene. We've had some testimony about, a few seconds, yes, but I thought it was longer. This is a continuation of that correction of the testimony, impeachment, whatever you want to call it.
In that case, Judge, it was asked and answered on the stand by Mr. Minshew.
This is actually him explaining it in narrative format, which makes it even more relevant because it's not a written statement later, it's a statement at the time, and it's a prior inconsistent statement to his testimony in court, and it's a prior inconsistent statement to his response on cross-examination. And it's in response to the questions that the state were asking about the bushes being on the property or visual obstructions being on the property. So it addresses those issues, Your Honor. It's a prior statement by this officer. It's perfectly admissible.
I'm glad I've got your opinion on the record. I figured you'd say that if you're trying to admit it. I mean,
It's in evidence, Your Honor. So.
okay.
So, Judge, I believe the proper way to do it would be to confront Officer Minshew or Mr. Minshew at this point about it and then play this depending on what happens when he talks to him about it.
Senator, because is somebody else also provide? Is there an officer that's engaged in a conversation?
Yes, Officer Brandenberry.
Well, he's just telling Officer Brandenberry something.
But is that officer responding?
Yes, Your Honor.
Barely. I mean, we're not offering his statement to the truth.
Let's zero in with him. Why don't you ask him if he calls us and see what we're
Well, we have to do it. I mean, I need to play it for him, or I can actually I have his transcript. So let's take a look at the transcript. I got it. I got it. Can we approach Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay, I understand what it is now. Yes. Well, let's give him an opportunity to address that, and then I understand, depending on what he says, we need to get into the video. That's fine. I mean, you're asking about his timeline, so let's get everybody zeroed
Are you
back.
saying I can't play this yet?
I don't remember what the last question was. So let's zero
it's
everybody
that
back
you
in.
were speaking to Officer Brandenberry about your observations of when you heard the shots And where you were when you heard them, and how quickly you were on the scene after hearing them.
That's correct.
Okay. And so,
Okay.
yeah.
We have a, around the past 1037 call at the house that I was looking for, they called out. I was coming right through there and I heard the shots. I didn't, typically didn't grab what's going on. I heard the shots, I was coming through, but I didn't realize what had happened until I got right there. And then, as I was coming around right by where the fire truck is, when the shots went fire, and I was right around that 30 bush over there coming this way.
All right, so I think what you're saying is right when the shots were fired, you were right around that bush over there.
Right.
You're literally pointing to a bush that you can see in your body cam.
Yeah, there's a large hedge of bush coming all the way across there.
Yeah, and you can see where it is right here in the frame of this video, right? You're pointing to a large bush right over here.
Yeah, it's a
You see
long,
that?
yeah, it's a long hedge. Correct.
Right. So when you hear the shots, you're over here by this long hedge, right?
Yeah, on the other side of that.
Just on the other side of that.
Right.
And then you come right into here where you have a view of the two gentlemen waving you down and Mr. Arbery's body in the road.
Right. I came into view after that hedge. Correct.
Okay, all right. So that's
When I got around here, man, he was already on the ground. Took me to see, trying to see what had happened. And he's the one that comes to call come out for us. Yeah.
okay. And I believe that what you had testified to on direct examination with the state is that Mr. Bryan said to you that he did not recognize the people in the truck, meaning in the white truck.
Yes.
I think you testified to that. In fact, he told you he really didn't know who those people were. You recall him telling you that?
I don't remember exactly, but it was to
He
that.
said, I don't know who those people are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And at no time did he say to you that he was in communication with Travis McMichael or Greg McMichael throughout any of this interaction.
That's correct.
That there were no hand signals by Travis to go a certain direction or not.
No, he didn't mention any of that.
One moment, please. Okay. Thank you. Sir, I don't have anything further. Yeah.
Okay, additional questions?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Go.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Roddy Bryan, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're all trying to adjust here. Roddy Bryan never told you that he tried to run over Mr. Arbery with his truck, did he?
No.
Roddy Bryan never told you that he tried to hit Mr. Arbery with his truck?
No.
Okay. Obviously, had Roddy Bryan told you that he assaulted Mr. Arbery with his pickup truck, you would not have sent him home with his truck.
Correct.
I have a few questions for you about Mr. Bryan's demeanor on the day in question. Okay? And by demeanor, you're familiar with what that phrase means.
That's correct.
Okay. Did Roddy Bryan appear to you that day to be mentally unstable?
He did not.
Did he appear to you that day to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs or other intoxicants?
No, he didn't.
Did, as far as you could see, was Mr. Bryan loud or boisterous on the scene?
No, he wasn't. He was cooperative.
Okay. Was Mr. Bryan gleeful at any point?
No.
Would you describe him as boastful or bragging at any point?
No.
Okay. Did he appear to you to be attention seeking? Hey, look at me.
No, he didn't.
Was Mr. Bryan dropping F-bombs or spewing profanity?
No, he didn't.
Was Mr. Bryan in any way disrespectful to you, other officers, or others at the scene?
No, he was respectful.
Roddy Bryan told you that Mr. Arbery tried to get in his truck, did he not?
He did.
He told you that he felt he was trying to get to the door handle.
That's correct.
And Mr. Bryan pointed out what he believed were Mr. Arbery's fingerprints on the side of his truck, behind the door.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. I know this may sound like a silly question, but I have to ask. From your observation, is Mr. Bryan's pickup truck capable of being driven sideways?
It is not.
And is there any evidence that you observed that his truck actually had been operated in that manner, that it had been moving sideways at any point?
It did not appear to be moving sideways, no.
Now, we see Mr. Bryan's truck in the body cam video. You recall that?
I do recall.
Okay. When you spoke with Mr. Bryan, did he advise you whether the truck was in the same location at the time the shooting actually took place?
He didn't say specifically, no.
Did he suggest to you that it was a bit further back from the deceased at the time of the shooting?
Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Minshew just said he didn't talk to him about the positioning of the truck otherwise.
Did Mr. Bryan suggest to you that he had moved his vehicle closer after the shooting?
No, he did not.
Yeah, I approach you with a truck.
Yes.
Sir, directing your attention to the bottom half of page 14. Bottom half of page 14.
Okay, you.
Now,
there.
this has been nearly a year and a half since you took statements from Mr. Bryan. Having had a chance to review the transcript of your body cam, did Mr. Bryan in fact suggest to you that he had moved his vehicle closer to the crime scene prior to your arrival?
Okay, give me one moment if you don't mind.
Yes.
I do not see that indication on here.
Do you recall asking, okay, and do you remember where you were at this point?
I can look in my transcript, but I don't remember.
Okay. Do you recall? Go ahead.
Yeah. What page are we on?
We're on page 14, about 2/3 of the way down. My copy of the transcript doesn't have line numbers, or I would give that to you. It's about 2/3 of the way down.
Yes, I see. I asked, do you remember where you were at this point?
And Mr. Bryan answered you?
He says, I was back a little further than I am right now.
Yes, sir. So in fact, he indicated that he did move his truck closer.
Yeah, I just don't know at what point during he did it.
I gather that. Would that statement to you be consistent with the quote-unquote the video of the shooting in this case?
Well, he was still moving forward during the video, traveling in the forward direction.
Yes, sir. But when the video goes off, his vehicle is back further than it is on your body cam video.
I'd have to
Objection
watch
to
it.
ask and answer, Judge.
You can go ahead. Go ahead.
I'd have to watch it, sir. I just don't remember.
Okay. All right. Do you recall Mr. Bryan telling you that he worked at Southern Hardware?
I don't recall.
Do you recall whether he had any known connection to law enforcement?
I don't remember him telling me that.
He certainly never worked with you.
No, sir, he did not.
Okay. You were asked earlier whether Mr. Bryan told you that he called 911. Do you recall that question?
I was asked if he called 911?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I don't remember him calling 911.
In truth, you never asked Mr. Bryan whether he called 911.
I don't remember if he said he did or not, or he never mentioned that he called 911 either.
But you never asked.
Don't recall asking him, no.
Okay. And to be fair, you were already aware at that time of at least one 911 call.
Yes, I do believe that a few other calls came in during my time of travel there, but they didn't get out on the radio yet.
But you were responding to at least one call.
I was responding, yes, to a call for a suspicious person, yes.
Okay. So there was no question in your mind at that time that 911 had been called.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Bryan told you that it was quote-unquote obvious that Mr. Arbery was up to something?
I don't remember. If you want to point me out to the transcript.
Yes. We'll come back to that one. Mr. Bryan told you that he had been hearing and reading about stuff going on in the neighborhood?
Objection, Your Honor. Based on rule of completeness, this wouldn't be necessary to complete what was discussed in his direct examination.
It's not, the rule of completeness isn't about whether the state discussed it in the direct examination. The question is whether the rule of completeness requires that it be brought out to complete the statement. If they had brought it out, I wouldn't be asking.
And we don't believe it's necessary in fairness, Judge.
He's asking.
Which statement is he talking about? What is it necessary to complete? Which part of it?
I thought the state inquired as to what, if any, knowledge Mr. Bryan had that day. I thought they had already gone on to that in a different way.
Well, what would he be aware of? I had no problem with the question. If it's directed at what he was aware of at the time.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Bryan advised you that he had been hearing and reading about stuff going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I feel like I remember him saying that that people had been getting broken into out there.
Did he advise you that it seemed to have gotten worse in the weeks before the shooting?
I don't remember that.
Directing your attention to page 28, in the middle. I believe that's right below the comment, "Welcome to the neighborhood."
Would you like me to quote it?
Yes, sir. What Mr. Bryan said.
Correct. He says, I've been here for 3 years. I've been seeing some crap go on. It's been worse during the last 3 weeks from what I've been hearing and reading.
Thank you, sir. Now, did you follow up with Mr. Bryan about specifics about the crime in the neighborhood, or who knew what when? Was that your role on the scene that day?
No, sir. It was just for what we were there for, which at this point was a shooting.
Did you leave that to the investigators?
So,
Did you leave that to the investigators?
did I leave it for them?
That subject?
Yes, sir. For me, out there as a patrol unit is for scene security, and then the investigators dive deeper into the investigation.
Very good. That wasn't your role as you perceived it.
Correct.
All right. And Mr. Bryan told you that Mr. Arbery would not stop.
Can you point me to that, please? Just been so long, I don't remember.
We'll come back to that. All right. I'm going to ask you some questions in a minute about the video, but before we get into that, do you recall Officer Roberts ribbing you or picking on you about quote-unquote relaxing in Mr. Bryan's truck?
Yeah, when she first walked up, yeah.
Something about getting in a car with her?
Objection to hearsay of Officer Roberts, Your Honor.
It's not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. It's explaining the officer's conduct.
Well, I'm not sure where we're going with this, so
Okay.
let's get it back to the case. I mean, if you can tie it together, all right, but I'm not sure. I don't really understand where we're going right now.
Okay. I believe you answered earlier that one of your primary responsibilities as first officer on the scene was to secure it for your safety and the safety of the other officers.
Correct.
Okay. Is it fair to say you wouldn't be relaxing in a truck with a random stranger if you felt your safety was endangered?
Upon getting on scene, one of my first things that I do is I do scan for immediate threats, and I did not see anything that was an immediate threat at that time. And it's not uncommon for us to be, whether it's going to a home and going into people's personal space in their rooms and such during investigations, so it's not uncommon.
Okay. Well, obviously you didn't view Mr. Bryan as a threat.
No, I didn't see him as a threat.
Okay. And is it fair to say you were trying to develop a rapport with Mr. Bryan at this point?
That's what we do, yes, sir, every
Okay.
time we interview.
Could you get more information?
Sure.
And in your defense, you advised the other officers that Mr. Bryan was a main witness.
Mr. Bryan advised me that he was a witness, and when I get on scene, whatever people are claiming to be, that's what they are
Yes, sir.
for that time.
But in explaining the priority you gave to Mr. Bryan to your colleagues, it was because he was an important witness.
Yes, at that time.
Yes, sir. Now, about the video itself. Do you recall whether Mr. Bryan told you that he started the video because he thought Mr. Arbery was going to get away?
I don't recall exactly word for word. I do remember even asking him, was he just trying to get a identification of him?
And he told you he was.
Yes.
And why is it that he wanted to get his picture?
I'm not sure if you can put me to that quote.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Directing your attention to the bottom of page 22 and the top of page 23. Oh, I'm sorry. You got it in front of you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Do you recall asking?
I will. Yeah, I will tell you now. I asked him at what point did he start videoing, and Mr. William Bryan said, "Well, I thought he was going to get away."
And you said,
So that
okay.
was the reason.
Okay. All right. Did Mr. Bryan know how many videos he had?
I think he said he wasn't sure. He had several. He had a couple.
Did he tell you he had thought he started recording sooner than he did or earlier than he did?
There's a little confusion there. I think he even knew at that time exactly when he started recording.
When you and he sat in his truck, he didn't even know what he had.
Right. He said he didn't know exactly what was on there.
And he gave you the phone in his car.
Yeah, that's where we viewed it at in the car.
And you asked him if you could download it for evidence or obtain it as evidence.
Right.
And he told you sure.
He did, yes.
Okay. And you had trouble, because of the size of the file on the phone, you had trouble sending it by wireless.
Yeah, that's correct. Sending it to email.
So you asked Mr. Bryan for permission to make a second copy, a cropped copy, a shorter video.
Right.
There'll be a smaller file.
That's correct.
And easier to send.
Say it again?
It'll be easier to send.
Yes.
Okay. And he agreed to that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at one point, I believe in the video, I think it's been shown, he told you that he had to put his phone down.
That's correct.
And at that point, he's putting both hands on the wheel.
I'm not sure what he was doing.
Okay. Did you see the wheel turning?
Yeah, we'd have to watch the video for me to
Okay.
narrate it.
Fair enough. And is it fair to say that Mr. Bryan fully cooperated with you?
Yeah, he was cooperative.
Is there anything more that he could have done for you that day?
All we expect is for people to be cooperative, and he did just that.
Okay. Now, I think you indicated earlier you did not Mirandize Mr. Bryan.
No, I did not.
And of course, he was free to leave.
Yes,
And in fact, you allowed him to leave the crime scene.
I did.
And that wasn't just your decision, that was a joint decision.
For who else?
Well, in your presence, did Officer Roberts tell Miss...
Objection to hearsay of Officer Roberts, Your Honor.
It's not being offered for the truth of the matter, sir. Whether he was in fact free to leave or not isn't the point.
Well, how about what he recalls? I understand he was free to leave.
Okay.
And this officer's understanding is he was free to leave.
Do you recall another officer also telling Mr. Bryan that he was free to leave?
I don't recall. I'd have to see again. It's been so long. But he was not detained, which is why I didn't Mirandize him. And most of the calls that I respond to are not things of the nature of like homicide. So most of my investigations are based upon theft and shoplifting, things like that. So I usually talk to a witness, get their information, and then they're released when I get done with them. I'm not used to having to keep witnesses on scene.
Very good. Direct your attention to the top of page 35.
Okay, I'm there.
At least one other officer also told Mr. Bryan that he was free to leave. That he didn't have to come downtown.
Yeah, it looks like in different contexts, but said another officer said you don't have to come down. We don't have to follow you around. And then he said, whenever y'all tell me to go, though, I'm fixing to be right down here at 307.
2 houses down?
Yeah, that's what he said.
He said he'd be on the front porch.
Yeah, he said it'd be down at 307 Burford.
Did you search Mr. Bryan for any weapons at the scene?
I did not.
You didn't search Mr. Bryan's truck for weapons either.
I did not, no.
You didn't observe any weapons on Mr. Bryan.
I did not observe any weapons on him, no.
He was armed only with a cell phone, as far as you could tell.
Yeah, as far as I could tell, it's a phone.
Okay. To your knowledge, Mr. Bryan was unarmed at the time of the shooting.
To my knowledge, that's correct.
And again, he didn't appear pose a danger to you or anyone else on the scene.
I did not see him being dangerous to me, no.
I have a few questions about the direct examination today. Well, before I get there, Mr. Bryan told you that details of this incident were fuzzy to him when you were speaking with him.
I do recall that.
Okay. And in fact, he was hard to follow.
Yes, at times when he was trying to describe the directions that they went, it was very hard to follow.
Which is why you had to go back through his explanation of what happened several times.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, on direct examination, you were asked a question about Bryan's quote-unquote involvement in the moments before Mr. Arbery was quote-unquote gunned down. Do you remember that question?
I do.
And then you were asked to read back a portion of the transcript in which Mr. Bryan says that he blocked Mr. Arbery. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
That was page 33.
Yeah, it appears to be so.
Yeah. But in fact, as you look back over the portion of the transcript that the district attorney asked you to read, that wasn't moments before the shooting, was it?
What do you mean moments? Is in what?
Well, when you're reciting what Mr. Bryan said about blocking Mr. Arbery, that description was not in the moments before the shooting, was it?
Let's see. Give me a moment. Let me see what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
He went on to further describe some other things that happened afterward. But since I wasn't there to see what happened before I got there, I don't know how much the moments had passed before it happened.
Directing your attention to the 8th line of page 33 of your transcript.
Okay. Looks like Mr. Bryan says, and he came back through this way. So I went back up in here and went that way. And that's about where your video picks up when I turned around.
Okay. So all that takes place before the now famous video starts. So it wasn't moments before the shooting. It was before the video that Mr. Bryan took started. Yes or no?
Can you ask me the question directly?
When Mr. Bryan is referring to blocking at that point, that's not moments before the shooting, as suggested by the question. It was, in fact, before Mr. Bryan's video begins.
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. To be fair, when you're directed to read a part of the transcript, you read that portion of the transcript. Am I correct?
Right.
Okay. It's not your place to correct lawyers when they ask you questions, is it?
No.
Okay. Now, on direct examination, I believe you said that Mr. Bryan attempted to block Mr. Arbery 5 times. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
You recall there being some question as to how many times Mr. Bryan used the word block as opposed to how many times he actually did block Mr. Arbery. You recall that issue?
Yes. What was in the transcript versus how many times he actually did it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Well, but then you answered that, in fact, Mr. Bryan attempted to block Mr. Arbery 5 times?
It was stated in there approximately 5 times, different occasions.
Okay. Okay. Well, would it surprise you that a word counter reveals that the word block is used in the transcript, the entire transcript, only 6 times?
Okay.
And that 3 of those times refer to Mr. Bryan circling the block, not blocking Mr. Arbery.
objection, Judge, to the defense testifying versus answering a question?
I'll move on.
That's sustained. Move on.
You recall filling out a police report in this case,
I did.
summarizing your encounter with Mr. Bryan that day.
Yes.
Okay. If you could take a moment and review that police report. In your police report summarizing the conversation you've been testifying to today, how many times did you report that Mr. Bryan blocked Mr. Arbery?
None.
Well, it'd be one. One. Certainly not 5. Am I
Okay.
correct?
The way it's worded, yes.
All right. And although presented as a consistent narrative here on direct, I think you've already indicated Mr. Bryan, you and Mr. Bryan went back over the same subject matter several times.
Yes, in the directions that they were traveling.
Okay. Including at least one time in the presence of another witness in this case. And I'm not asking you which one.
Yes.
Okay. And you've previously testified that Mr. Bryan's story was confusing to you.
Yes, the directions that they were traveling in, without me looking at a map, it was hard to follow.
And you really couldn't make out exactly what he was trying to say.
That's correct.
And in fact, while you were... No, that wasn't you. Never mind. So, having had time to think about it some more, when you testified earlier that Mr. Bryan told you that he blocked Mr. Arbery 5 separate times, perhaps you meant to say that he used the word block 5 separate times.
I think he used the word corner one time in there as well.
Yeah, but what you're doing when you talk about the number of times that Mr. Bryan uses this word is you're counting all the different times you've gone back over the same incident with him.
I'm not sure.
You don't think that changes the flavor of your testimony?
Well, he did mention on several occasions blocking, and one time he said cornering him in.
As you spoke to Mr. Bryan that day, it was pretty clear Mr. Bryan didn't know how many times he did anything.
Objection is speculation, Your Honor.
I'll rephrase. Mr. Bryan never told you that he blocked Mr. Arbery 5 times or 4 times or 3 times. He never told you how many times at all.
I'd have to go back in, but it looked like there was a couple occasions where he said he cornered, and where he tried to block him off, he did.
Okay. But you never did. You never were able to tie down exactly what happened when for Mr. Bryan.
Exactly, no. It was confusing at some point on their direction of travel. Correct.
All right. Last question. Roddy Bryan never expressed to you any intention on his part to physically injure Mr. Arbery in any way, did he?
No, he didn't.
No further questions.
Any redirect from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. Okay, Mr. Minshew, so we'll go ahead and watch the first few seconds of this again, okay? Because I have a question to follow up with you on.
Just that's all you to fill all the numbers and traffic jail too.
Okay, so are you able to see who this person is right here?
To the very far left,
Yes, sir.
Looks like Mr. William Bryan.
Okay, and who is this person right here?
That would be Gregory McMichael.
And what direction is he walking away from?
He's coming from the direction of William Bryan in the white truck.
Okay, and what did he just say to Travis McMichael?
He said that Roddy has it on film. He has it on video.
Okay, so Mr. McMichael and Mr. Bryan were talking right before you pulled up, right?
I later saw in my camera, my video Axon camera, that while or right after I put up caution tape, that Mr. Gregory McMichael was over at the truck with William Bryan.
Okay, and that's a separate time, but here he's walking away from Mr. Bryan while you're just pulling up, right?
It appears that way.
Okay. Now, you were asked about, I think by Mr. Sheffield, about those bushes that we were talking about when you were actually clearing the intersection. Remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Can you just give the exhibit number just for the record?
Sure. This is State's Exhibit 220, the very first video clip. It is at 1 minute and 08 seconds.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Minshew, do you recognize what we're looking at here in States 220? Do you recognize this area here?
Yes, that's the entrance to Satilla Shores coming in on Satilla Drive.
Okay, so I'm going to play it for you, and if you can just tell us where you think you were in your patrol car when you heard the shots, okay? What road are we on right here?
Satilla Drive.
Okay. And are we still on Satilla Drive right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably around here, starting from there for the next few feet-ish.
Okay.
I'd probably say a little bit further.
All right.
Okay, we're going to be we're in the window now. We're in the window to where I was
Right
about
here?
at. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm gonna back up just a little bit. All right. Do you see this house? This
Yes,
building,
ma'am.
the structure? Okay. Do you remember this structure being?
Objection. You have them on redirect.
Okay.
So leading.
I didn't finish the question, but I'll rephrase it.
Thank you.
Sure. Now, you previously testified that the subject of the dispatch call was like a house under construction?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you see that house under construction in this clip of this body cam?
Yes, ma'am. That's the one that's to the right there.
Okay, is it this one?
It looks like it. Yes.
Okay. So at the point where you hear the shots, were you past this house?
I can't quite remember where I was exactly.
Okay.
I was just in that area. I
In
just
this
don't remember.
general vicinity?
Yes, I just don't remember exactly where.
Okay. So whenever I get to those shrubs that you were discussing,
Okay.
can you let me know?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Back up. Okay. That's all that landscape there.
All this right here?
Yeah, it's there's a tree there, obviously a large moss tree, but there's some type of like a large big bush shrubbery going all the way across to the road.
Okay. So at the point where your patrol car is here, are you able to see the intersection of Holmes and Satilla?
Not quite yet.
Okay. Would the people over here at that intersection be able to see you or your car?
Looks to be doubtful through the landscape.
It's asking from his perspective. Otherwise, it's speculation.
But you couldn't see anything that was going on at that intersection, right?
That's correct. I couldn't.
Okay. Now, at this point, have you cleared the bushes?
Yes.
Okay. And is this the intersection here in view?
That is Satilla Drive and Holmes Road.
Okay. Okay. Now, Mr. Goff asked you whether Mr. Bryan ever used the words run over when talking about what he did to Ahmaud. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And he also asked you whether Mr. Bryan ever used the word hit. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did Mr. Bryan use the word block in? Words block in.
I do recall him using block in and corner.
Okay. And he used the word corner as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. And did he also use the words angled at him?
Yes, something at him.
Okay. Now, when you were talking to Mr. Bryan, did you know what had gone on right before you pulled up to the scene when you started talking to him?
No.
Okay. So did you know specifically what kinds of questions you were going to ask this guy?
The basic general questions, the who, what, when, why, where's, but didn't know what had happened yet. So.
Okay. So you were trying to gather information.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So essentially, were you just asking Mr. Bryan open-ended questions and let him do the talking?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you never specifically asked him if he called 911, is what you testified to.
I don't recall. I'd have to look at the transcript. I don't remember.
Okay. But you didn't specifically ask him a lot of things,
That's right.
right? You just asked him to tell me what happened.
Yes.
Okay. And at any time, did he ever say, I called 911?
I don't recall him saying it.
Okay. So I want you to look at page 28 of that transcript, please.
I'm there.
Okay, and look at lines 12 through 14. Do you remember being asked by Mr. Goff about Mr. Bryan essentially saying that things had been getting worse over the past 3 weeks?
I do remember that.
Okay.
He did.
All right, so he said, here from lines 12 through 14, read for me what he said.
I've been here for 3 years. I've been seeing some crap go on. It's been worse during the last couple of 3 weeks from what I've been hearing and reading.
Okay, so I want you to go up to the same page, line 3. Okay?
Okay.
Go ahead and read from line 3 to line 6.
Mr. Bryan said, I've been here for a little over 3 years. I was renting this house over here from a buddy of mine, and I kept trying to get my money right to buy it, and I just bought it last week.
Okay. So at the bottom, Mr. Bryan is telling you things are so bad here over the last 3 weeks, right?
Yes.
But then he still just bought a house in that community 1 week ago.
That's what it says here.
Now, you were also asked about you not seeing Mr. Bryan as necessarily a threat. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Because you went and sat in his pickup truck.
That's correct.
Okay. But Mr. Bryan didn't try to hit you with his pickup truck, did he?
He did not, no.
Okay. He didn't block you with his pickup truck, did he?
He did not.
Okay. He didn't angle at you with his pickup truck, did he?
No.
And he didn't corner you into ditches with his pickup truck, did he?
No.
Okay. And is that why you didn't see him as a threat?
I didn't see him as a threat because I didn't see any reason to be threatened.
Okay. So, in terms of Mr. Bryan being a witness at the time when you're talking to him, as the patrol officer, is it your job to investigate whether a crime was committed and exactly what happened?
No, ma'am. The investigation is done by the Criminal Investigation Division, and as patrol units, our primary is to secure the scene and be more of a help, on perimeter checks and evidence. So we'll assist them, but that's not our primary position, no.
Okay. Is it your job to bring charges or take out warrants?
No, ma'am. We don't make those decisions.
Okay. So at the point where you're talking to Mr. Bryan, are you just gathering information
That's correct.
for the detectives or investigators who are going to come on and pick up with the case and carry it forward?
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Minshew, if I were to ask you something at any point and you disagreed with what I'm asking you, would you tell me that?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you, under oath, agree to something that's not true?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So, Mr. Goff asked you about your report here and how it didn't mention certain things.
Yes, ma'am.
You remember that?
Yes.
How long is your report for this case?
Page or so. Yeah, about a page.
Okay. If I were to show it to you, would that refresh your recollection?
Sure.
No, we'll stipulate this initial.
And I'm not trying to admit anything. How long's your report?
It's about a page and a quarter.
Page and a quarter. Okay. Now that transcript that you're holding in your hand, how long is that?
52 pages.
52 pages. Okay? So is it safe to say that your report doesn't contain the entirety of what happened on that day that you witnessed on your body cam?
Of course.
Okay. Is that why you upload body cams so people can see what actually happened versus just relying on your 1 1/4 page report?
Yes.
Okay. So I got one more question for you. Do you remember towards the end of your body cam having to go back somewhere to get someone?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, most of the things that I investigate as a patrol unit, we don't have to really detain witnesses very long. We gather information, get the personal information, phone numbers, and then usually they're on their way. We make our decision fairly quickly for probable cause. Mm-hmm. This one, he went back to 307 Burford, and my supervisor at the time, the sergeant on scene, he did the right thing. Once he realized that the witness went home, he advised for me to go get him and come back to speak with investigators there.
Okay. I think that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything, well, hold one at a time. Anything on those issues, Mr. Sheffield?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Goff, on those issues?
Mr. Minshew, a moment ago when the state started examining you again, Were you telling him what you actually recalled, or what you thought the district attorney wanted you to say?
Which question are you referring to?
Well, I can be clear. I believe you just testified that Mr. Bryan, when you were speaking to him on the scene, referred or referenced angling Mr. Arbery several times. Do you recall just moments ago telling the jury that he was angling Mr. Arbery?
I think it was angled at him.
Yeah, angled at him. You remember saying that?
Yes.
Okay. Show me where in the course of that entire 50-page transcript Mr. Bryan uses the word angled. Your Honor, perhaps the district attorney's office would stipulate that he did use that word, save this witness the trouble of going back through the transcript.
The court's not involved in stipulations.
Your Honor, I believe the state would like to reach a stipulation. Put it on the record. I believe the stipulation would be that this witness, that Mr. Bryan, in speaking with this witness, never used the word angle or angled.
Your Honor, he used that with another investigator. That's correct.
Sir?
Yeah, I see the block in the corner on these.
If it's a,
I don't need Mr. Sheffield's permission to make a stipulation.
I'm not sure that was the objection.
Not the objection, it's the state stating that.
Next time, if we're going to stipulate to something, let's go ahead and do that so we have some prior. I'll address that on the record once we have an opportunity to do so. I understand that that's the stipulation of the parties. You can go ahead.
Sir, I'm not going to make you read through the rest of that transcript. You're good.
Yeah, I see corner and block so far, but I haven't gone all the way through.
There's a lot of witness statements in this case, aren't there?
Yeah, I believe so.
Fair enough. I'm getting back to an issue that I started earlier and lost my place. Mr. Bryan told you that it was obvious that Mr. Arbery was up to something that day. Did he not?
Can you, if you don't mind, could you refer me?
Page 20. I previously referenced page 28.
Okay.
I believe it's page 20. Six lines up from the bottom.
Okay, looks like Mr. William Bryan here says, I mean, if the guy would have stopped, you know what I mean, to find out what was going on, he obviously was up to something.
Thank you, sir. No further questions.
All right. Thank you, sir. You may step down. And I understand this witness also we are releasing today but remains subject to recall.
Correct, Your Honor.
All right, you are released for the day subject to recall.
All right.
Thank you. We can make it that time. Before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, lawyers, the court, we use words that have a lot of meaning, and I want to explain one to you. In this case, evidence in the form of a stipulation has been introduced. A stipulation is an agreement between the parties concerning some fact or facts which you as the jury are bound to accept as facts during your deliberations. You may give the facts in the stipulations any weight or credibility you determine appropriate in your deliberations. So, with that explanation of what a stipulation is, we're going to take a 15-minute recess and we'll come back for continuation of the evidence. Thank you.
It's all right for the jury.
All right, y'all be seated. If we're going to enter into stipulations, let's do so without negotiating in front of the jury, and that way maybe we can figure out language before it is actually presented in the court, and all the parties have an understanding of what that stipulation is so that they have an opportunity to object if they need to object, and so that we don't get extra verbiage into the stipulation that would be objectionable on the record. If we could do it that way, I'm happy to address stipulations, and again, they've been charged on it, but let's try to do it in a way that cleans up the language so it's very clear what the facts are. Let's go 15 minutes. We're in recess.